Hello and welcome to the College Football Fanatics podcast. I just did an episode over on the WIUR Gales Radio channel, but I wasn't super happy with how it turned out. So I'm actually going to be redoing the podcast here on the channel for the official for our official channel. So our Instagram and the link to our Instagram's actually going to be in the description below. And I wanted to go a little deeper into information. So this episode is going to focus a lot about tragedies that has struck college football in the past about 50 years or so. We're going to start with something lighter and just recapping the rest of last weekend's games. But this episode will definitely cover the heavier, more sadder parts of it. And I'm hoping to be a little more proud of this episode than I was on the original channel. So, or on the Gales Radio show. So. I'm going to be here talking about this for the next probably 40 minutes ish. So let's hop right back into it. So we left off in talking about scores and games with Alabama and Ole Miss. So I'm only going to cover a few of these games. The only ones that I think are really, all that worth mentioning and stuff like that. It's only going to be a few games, and then I'm going to move on to the more tragic sides of college football. But let's start with, obviously, Alabama, Ole Miss. Ole Miss was ranked 11th at this point. Alabama was ranked 9th. They're both 8-2. Alabama is on a decline in the past year so far. I think that they are not entirely used to not being college football's number one team. And I think that, I think it's evident in the way that there was a report that Nick Saban and Bryce Young chewed out the Alabama offense at practice this week. So it's, I think it's starting to come out in the media that, Nick Saban is not happy, which I understand because he's used to winning a lot. He's used to, getting, SEC championships and, national championships. And he's not doing that with this Alabama team. So it's understandable. But so, and I think, Ole Miss has had several scandals in the past. I think, they've had some recruiting scandals and things like that. So it'll be interesting. Their punishments, I think, have all ended from those. I think those were over like 5 years ago. At this point, so I think it was in the like early 2010s. I think that most of those scandals happened. So it's good to see Ole Miss back to a point where they can realistically start challenging maybe not the top tier teams in the SEC, but definitely the higher tier teams. So not the mediocre, but the good teams. So it'll be interesting to see where they are next year. I hope this adds in a bump in recruiting for Ole Miss. So I will now move on to the next team. Next game, Clemson and Louisville. Clemson has their ticket into the ACC conference championship, and I believe, I don't know who they're playing, but I can. Who are they playing? Oh, that's right. They're playing the Tar Heels. They're playing North Carolina in that championship. So that's been decided. It'll be it'll be the rest of their season should be just kind of a more or less a just brush by. I mean, I think that Clemson is overrated for their schedule. I think that there are teams in their schedule that are still ranked that shouldn't be. I'm thinking of NC State and Oregon State. I don't think that they're top 25 teams. I think that they're much better teams that have much better schedules and much better wins. And I didn't think that Clemson in the first AP poll should have even, or in the first college football playoff poll should have even been in the top 5. I think that they were more of like a 7 or a 7th ranked team. So yeah. Next up, UCLA and Arizona. Arizona gave UCLA its second loss. Which was a difficult which was a difficult thing for UCLA because I think that they were partially hoping that they would that they would be able to challenge USC's spot in the Pac-12 playoff. Or sorry, the Big 12 playoff, not the Pac. Oh no, sorry, the Pac-12 playoff. I was right the first time. Brain's messing up here. So I think it was really important for them to want to win this game, and now that they haven't, I don't think that they have a chance at making the Pac-12 playoff. I think that Oregon and USC are likely going to be in there. So it should be interesting to see, the rest of that. Let's see who else. NC State lost once again. They're now 7-3. Notre Dame beat Navy. Yeah, that's all I'm going to talk about for now. I think that we'll talk about the upcoming games in Week 12 here on Friday, and we're going to. And we'll talk about the game of the week, which is going to be the USC UCLA game. So it'll and Utah and Oregon will also be a featured game. It won't be the game of the week, but it'll be featured. So it'll be a fun Friday. It'll be a fun Friday video. A nice contrast to this. Sort of depressing episode that we're about to get into here. Sorry, I just got to drink a little bit of my iced tea here. So the first tragedy. Earlier this week, University of Virginia had a shooting, and 3 people were killed, all football players for Virginia, and I think that it's really started to And it really made me starting to think about thinking about the other tragedies and dark history of college football, and I think it really amplified, or it really blew up things that I had already heard of. So I want to talk about 4 specific events. So the first one's obviously the West Virginia tragedy. It was a former walk-on that did it. As of right now, I don't think there's been any established motive for it, and I'm not going to speculate on any sort of motive at all. I'm just here to tell you that it happened, and it's sad. A couple of other players or a couple of other people were injured in the shooting. They were coming back from a field trip, I believe, and I think that they are currently recovering in the hospital. Virginia has put out statements and things like that, and the suspect was apprehended, and I think he's facing charges currently. So that's one of the more depressing episodes. But the more depressing episode is that. I should say more depressing, but one of the other depressing episodes in college football's history in the past 70 years is the infamous Wichita State football team plane crash, where on October 2nd, 1970, a plane crash occurred in I think it was Nevada. And it was a plane that was carrying, I think it was somewhere like 37 passengers, and 29 were killed at the scene, or 29 died at the scene, and 2 later died on the way to the hospital, bringing the total to 31 casualties. And 6 bad injuries. And the plane crash was attributed to essentially pilot error. It was the pilot filing an improper pre-flight plan, and the post takeoff. It was the probable cause to be the pilot made improper decisions in flight or in planning, which was the in planning was the pre-flight. They took an alternate route. So without a proper understanding of the plane's capabilities, and it caused a crash. 14 of the people who died were football players, and there were several coaching staff and other supporters of the football team killed in the accident. And one plane crash in 1970 was bad enough. But to have 2 plane crashes within 6 weeks of each other, separating at about 6 weeks, is horrendous. And the second plane crash was the Marshall University plane crash, in which all 75 passengers of Southern Airways flight 932 passed away and died on the crash. It was carrying essentially the entire varsity football team. It was carrying the coaching staff. It was carrying the boosters. It was carrying. It obviously had the pilots and the flight attendants and that staff there, but it was quite clearly a tragedy that devastated the Marshall University football team, in my opinion, even more than it did Wichita's football team, because Wichita had two planes flying parts of the team, and only one plane went down, the other plane went on. Almost all of the players on the varsity football team were on this plane, and everybody unfortunately passed away, and everybody died as a result of this plane crash. This actually resulted in Wichita State later in 1986 ended its football program. Marshall University nearly ended its football program. The last year was nearly 1970. And you guys should watch the movie We Are Marshall. It's about this. It's about the events after the 1970 plane crash, and how Marshall stayed strong and actually was able to present a football team on the field the next game. And it was really important because there was actually a vote that was about to occur. There was a vote about to occur to disband the football program. And essentially what happened was, the remainder players of the football team got everybody that they could to come and actually support the retaining of the football team, the keeping of the football team at a vote. And it was very the movie itself is very moving, and it's definitely worth a watch. And there's memorials and things like that. So unfortunately, with the plane crash, they actually had to find a new head coach. They had to find new athletic director, new everything. Jack Langham, I think, is the name of the Langle. Langle was the name of the football coach that took over the program after the accident. And the plane crash was attributed to the descent below minimum descent altitude during non-precision approach under adverse conditions without visual contact with the runway environment. And it's possible that the instrumentation failure that occurred to allow this happen was because water had gotten into the plate's altimeter, throwing off height readings. And it essentially was they crashed before they reached the runway because they were just too low, essentially. I know that probable cause was very technical, but it's essentially just they went too low and they crashed, essentially. So the final scandal that I'm going to talk about is much more recent. It occurred in 2011. Well, I should say charges were brought in 2011. It didn't occur in 2011. It occurred over what seems to be a almost 30-year period, I think 12 years of which were at Penn State. So Jerry Sandusky was a defensive coordinator for Penn State University. And those of you who remember this, it was initially not covered very widely, but as information started to pop out, it began to get a lot of coverage and a lot of really bad press associated with Penn State. So he was accused of 48 accounts of sex crimes and things like that. And he was convicted of 45 of them. He was sentenced to a 30 to 60 year period in prison, which essentially was a prison sentence for him, due to the fact that he was by the minimum sentencing requirement. He would have been like 99 or 98 by the time he would have gotten out for the 30 years, essentially. And so it was basically a life sentence for him. The initial investigation wasn't covered all that much because it was almost viewed as a almost like a hit piece or a witch hunt against Jerry Sandusky until more evidence got kept getting released, essentially. And the reason that this all kicked off was because Mike McQuarrie witnessed a event, and I'm not going to go into detailed specifics because of the horrific nature of the crimes. So I'm not going to go into those specifics, but he reported what he saw to the head coach at the time, which was Mike Paterno, and Mike Paterno then instead of bringing this to the police, which they are required by law to do because they are trusted with the lives of young men and in some cases minors, they are required to disclose these type of events to the police. Mike Paterno actually, instead of going to the police, went to I think he went to the head of the athletic department, and then I think the athletic department head went to like the president, and eventually, like after like 11 days of knowing about this, they finally reported it to the police, and an investigation was launched. The findings later revealed that this had that multiple events had essentially occurred, and one of those events had occurred at the Alamo Bowl, and so with all of this happening, Penn State was looking to start getting some of the heat off of their backs for allowing this to happen within its walls, and they actually fired several members. They fired Mike McQuarrie. They fired. It was. Let me look here. I have it down here. So they fired. Sorry, just give me 1 second. So they fired Mike McQuarrie. They fired the head coach, Joe Paterno. They fired a couple of other people for like knowledge of the incident, or I think it was like concealment or something like that. Eventually, charges were brought upon several of the individuals that had apparently had knowledge of this, but I don't think that they went anywhere. McQuarrie then sued, I think, Penn State for the firing. It was like a wrongful termination. I think it was because they said that he went to the press or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Joe Paterno actually was fired because according to Penn State for a lack of leadership, for displaying a lack of leadership, essentially, which, in my opinion, should he have gone to the police immediately when he heard it? Yes. But saying that it's his fault, and that he's displaying a lack of leadership is not entirely accurate, in my opinion. But I don't know. A lot of people tended to agree with me. Apparently like 10,000 people came out to support the Joe Paterno. But the university basically started cutting all, ties, and the NCAA started cutting all things. And there was eventually a internal investigation led by Louis Freeh, Freeh. I believe that's how you spell it, Free. And it was a very controversial investigation because it was found that he was using a lot of hearsay and evidence that in proceedings had been struck down as admissible because of its questionable legality, and a lot of other, and that his investigation method itself was just flawed. And there was also some I believe there was some, um, um, I believe that there was some discussion on whether or not the NCAA was pressuring Free to, that they were working together to really make it sound like, Joe Paterno knew all about it and that he just wasn't doing anything. So it's one of those things. I'm not going to make a decision on like, oh, he should have been fired, he shouldn't have been fired. It doesn't matter. One of the things that added to the outrage against against Penn State for firing Joe Paterno was a few months after he was fired, he died of lung cancer, and things like his scholarship and his statue were all taken down following the release of the events, and it was particularly saddening to hear, because I look at this and I'm like, this is not what college football should be about. This is not, this gives college football a bad name, and I wish that it didn't take place. And I'm sure, Sandusky's victims all wish that it didn't take place and everything like that. So, that's all that I'm going to say on it. I know that that was all pretty, I know that was all pretty depressing and really almost and really sad. But I think it's important that we remember these things and that we do our best to not allow these things to happen again, because, if you're a parent and you're, sending your kid off to college to play football across the country, you're like, I trust, the coach with the safety and the protection of my child. And when it's the coach that puts your child in danger, or when something happens, it hurts, it hurts the trust that those parents place in their coaches, and it hurts the trust that the players put in their coaches. And I think it's really important that that we remember and that we do our best to not let these things change. I shouldn't say not let these things change. Not let these things diminish that effort to increase that trust between player and coach, and between parent and coach, because that trust is one of the things that I think college football is really founded on. I mean, if you're a family who lives in LA and your son wants to go to Penn State, you want to know that you can trust Penn State with your student's life, and I think that's important for not just recruiting, but also knowing that these students aren't being taken advantage of. So that's all I'm going to say in reference to the tragedies that I wanted to do. This is going to be the first episode of talking about history of college football, or having like a segment where history of college football is discussed. And this, they're not all going to be depressing and sad like this one was. I am going to be doing segments on great games, on history of the Rose Bowl, on history of other other games like the Iron Bowl, or the game between Ohio State and Michigan. On other rivalries, Oklahoma State type things. So this is just the first episode where we have a segment dedicated to that type of discussion. They're not all going to be depressing and sad like this one was, but we will have more episodes on history of college football, because I think you guys would enjoy it. I think it adds to what I bring to this channel. So for the next about 10 minutes, we're going to start going over games to look out for. On Friday, we're going to do the game of the week and other major games. But there are some games that I want to go over now because I'm just not gonna do them on Friday. Illinois and Michigan. Um, Illinois is their best chance at winning against Michigan is essentially cutting off Michigan's run game. Although I'm not 100% convinced that would destroy Michigan's chances of winning against Illinois, because I do think Michigan has I don't want to say robust pass game, but they have a competent pass game. The only issue that I see with Michigan's pass game is that they don't have a major wide receiver on their team. They don't have somebody who, you know, can you throw the ball up to them and, they're always going to get it essentially. They don't have a Marvin Harrison Jr. or they don't have, any of these other, major receiver type players. So that's the only concern that I have about Michigan. So TCU and Baylor. TCU is, in my opinion, almost a definite win on this game. Baylor's 6-4, TCU's 10-0, and obviously, I think that Dugan is a very competent quarterback. I think that he's very trustworthy with the ball for the most part, and he obviously tends to score a lot because he has 25 touchdowns and 2,500 yards. So almost for every 100 yards, he has a touchdown. Which is pretty interesting to see. They also have a great running back with 13 touchdowns on the season so far. The leader of the league currently has 18 rushing touchdowns. So he's up there with some of the better better teams. And then Ohio State plays Maryland. Maryland has almost no chance in this game. They just got their butts kicked by Penn State, so they have next to no chance. Although it's going to be, according to what I have, right now, it's going to be 7 degrees in Maryland for this game. So that could really hurt Ohio State's passing game, considering that it's going to be so cold there. But like I said, I don't think Maryland has a chance. I think Mine Williams and Travion Henderson are still out. I'll have to double check on that, but I think they're still out. And then last but not least, Miami and Clemson. Going into the beginning of this season, I had a lot of hopes for Miami. Mario Cristobal had become the head coach, and I'm not saying that Mario Cristobal is going to be a bad coach. It's possible that in the next few years he completely turns the program around and the U becomes it becomes like it was in the 90s, where it was a phenomenal place to go play football. But in the past 10, 20 years, it hasn't been the same as it was then. And, they had a really good recruiting year last year. So maybe it's just waiting for those players to fully develop into the capable players that I think that they will make, for them to really get their groove going. But they play Clemson. I already said at the beginning of this episode, Clemson's ranked way too highly. They're currently 9th. And I don't think they should be anywhere near that. The closest they should be is ranked 15th. They just don't have the same strength of schedule as other teams that have one more loss than them. So I don't think that they deserve to be at the 9th position. And you've seen DJ Ugalele. Sorry if I butchered his name. You haven't seen him play phenomenally. He struggled against Syracuse and had to be replaced, which was the only reason that they have a win against Syracuse. If he had stayed in, Syracuse would have probably won that game, in my opinion. And they obviously have that loss to Notre Dame, and it was a pretty bad loss for them. I mean, they got hammered pretty hard. And I mean, it's just, he, in my opinion, has been a pretty inconsistent player for Clemson this year. So we'll see how things stack up against Miami. They could lose, they could not lose, who knows? But I don't think that they have any chance of making the college football playoffs. Which is actually what I'm going to talk about next. So the college football playoffs were released last night, and the top 5 didn't change at all, essentially. The next 4 teams all moved up one spot. So LSU is up into 6th, USC is up into 7th, Alabama's up into 8th, and Clemson's up into 9th. Because Oregon lost. So Oregon has essentially no chance of making the playoffs again, making the playoffs this season. They are right in front of North Carolina and Ole Miss at 9-1 and 8-2 respectively. I have an issue with Washington being ranked behind Oregon, because I either you drop Oregon all the way down to like 14 and you raise Washington up to like 13, or you raise Washington above Oregon, or you just drop Oregon all the way down to 18. And I have a problem with this because head to head, Washington beat Oregon. They proved that they were the better team, and that should count for something within the AP and the college football playoff polls. But apparently, going head to head doesn't matter at all. So, that's my little rant for that. I think if so, obviously we're going to have a 1-loss Big Ten team by the end of the season, because Michigan and Ohio State can't stay at the top, because they do face each other in a couple of weeks. So it'll come down to who does Tennessee, who does the playoff committee think deserves to go in? Do they think that a pretty dominant Michigan team with possibly a close loss at Ohio State deserves to be above Tennessee, or do they believe that a Ohio State team that has been very good with a possibly close loss to Michigan at home deserve to be over Tennessee? And it's going to really it's going to really have that really big question mark there on who do they think deserves, to be higher. And this is all depending on the game being actually very close, which I think that it will be. I talked about it on Monday. So if you want to go, if you want to hear me talk about it, go watch the Monday episode. That's going to be it for today. I thank you for watching. Sorry it was a little depressing in the middle of the episode, but I think that we had that this was a good episode, and that, I think I'm going to do more college football history in the future. So thanks for listening. I will see you guys all on Friday when I do my games of the week preview. Bye, and have a great day.